In the vast expanse of the Galactic Coalition, where species from 1,000 worlds trade stories of their homelands, there exists one unspoken rule that governs every interaction, every negotiation, every moment of supposed peace. Never fully trust the humans to be defenseless. The other races learned this lesson through blood, plasma, and the screaming void of space. They discovered that when humans speak of security measures, they don't mean the simple force fields and automated sentries that suffice for civilized worlds. When humans build prisons, they don't just contain criminals, they prepare for war. What the galaxy doesn't understand is that humans have never known a moment of true peace. On every world they've touched, in every structure they've built, in every seemingly innocent gesture of cooperation, there lies a weapon waiting to be awakened. The galaxy calls Earth a death world for its harsh environment, its predators, its endless natural disasters. But they miss the real truth. The deadliest thing to ever emerge from that blue marble isn't the gravity, the radiation, or the storms that would crush most alien bones to powder. It's the species that learned to survive it all, and never forgot that survival means being ready for the next threat, always. They're about to learn why humans never let their guard down, not even in the most secure prisons in the galaxy. Especially not there, because when you're from a world that tried to kill you every single day, you don't just build walls to keep things in. You build them to keep everything else out. The transport ship Serenity's edge dropped out of hyperspace with a gentle hum that marked all Zenthari vessels, a sound designed to soothe rather than intimidate. Ambassador Kethvar straightened his elongated frame and adjusted his ceremonial robes as the first glimpse of Titan Station came into view through the observation deck's transparent aluminum windows. "Magnificent," whispered his aide, Jolnai, her forearms gesturing in the traditional pose of appreciation. The young Zenthari had never seen a human installation before, and Kethvar could understand her awe. Titan Station hung in space like a massive geometric flower, its petals formed by 12 massive habitat rings rotating slowly around a central hub. Each ring was large enough to house a small city, and the gentle blue glow emanating from their surfaces suggested artificial gravity fields that could support dozens of different atmospheric requirements. Solar collectors stretched out like delicate wings, drinking in the energy from the nearby star. "It's certainly extensive," Kethvar admitted, though something nagged at the back of his mind. In his 3 centuries of diplomatic service, he had visited installations across the galaxy. Most followed standard coalition protocols for space construction: minimal materials, maximum efficiency, standardized defensive systems that were more ceremonial than practical. This was different. "Sir," the ship's captain, a nervous Quellan whose tentacles twitched with anxiety, approached from behind. "We're receiving docking instructions from Titan Station Control. They're quite specific about our approach vector." Kethvar took the datapad and frowned. The approach pattern was complex, requiring multiple course corrections and speed adjustments that seemed unnecessary for a diplomatic visit. "These coordinates take us through 17 different approach zones. Captain, in your experience, have you seen such elaborate docking procedures?" The captain's skin shifted to a pale green, a Quellan expression of concern. "Never for a civilian transport, Ambassador. These are the kind of protocols usually reserved for military vessels entering high-security zones during wartime." "Perhaps the humans are simply being cautious," Jolnai offered. "After all, Titan Station is their primary correctional facility in this sector. Housing the galaxy's most dangerous criminals would require significant security measures." As they followed the prescribed approach, Kethvar found himself studying the station more carefully. What he had initially taken for aesthetic design choices began to reveal themselves as something else entirely. The solar collectors weren't just energy-gathering devices. Their positioning created overlapping fields of fire that could cover any approach to the station. The habitat rings themselves rotated in patterns that seemed random until he realized they were designed to prevent any single point from being vulnerable for more than a few minutes at a time. "Captain," he said slowly, "run a passive scan of the station's exterior. I want to know what we're looking at. The Quellen's tentacles writhed with worry. Sir, scanning a diplomatic facility without permission could be considered a passive scan, Kethvar repeated firmly. Nothing that would trigger their sensors. Simply analyze what we can observe with standard navigational equipment. The results came back within minutes, and the captain's skin shifted to a deep purple of shock. Ambassador, this isn't just a prison station. Explain. The hull composition shows layers I've never seen before. There's a standard titanium steel alloy that most stations use, but beneath that, the captain's voice dropped to a whisper. There are materials here that our sensors can't fully identify. Dense, metallic compounds that seem designed to absorb and redistribute energy rather than simply resist it. And the station's mass distribution is all wrong. Wrong how? For a facility of this size, housing approximately 50,000 inmates plus staff, the mass reading suggests something at least 3 times denser than it should be. Either the humans are using construction techniques we don't understand, or they've built something else entirely, Kethvar finished. As they drew closer, more details became apparent. What had looked like decorative elements on the station's hull resolved into carefully camouflaged weapon ports. The gentle curves of the habitat rings hid launch bays that could deploy fighters at a moment's notice. Even the docking bays themselves were marvels of defensive engineering. Each one could be sealed independently, and, if Kethvar's assessment was correct, jettisoned from the main station if necessary. Incoming transmission from Titan Station Control, the communications officer announced. On screen, the face that appeared on the view screen was unremarkably human. Middle-aged, weathered features, steady brown eyes that held the kind of calm confidence that came from years of experience. The man wore a simple uniform bearing the insignia of the Galactic Coalition Correctional Service. Ambassador Kethvar, welcome to Titan Station. I'm Warden Marcus Chen. We're honored to host the Coalition's inspection team. Warden Chun, Kethvar replied with a formal bow. We appreciate your cooperation with this routine evaluation. The Coalition Council wants to ensure that all correctional facilities meet the standards established by the Sentient Rights Accords. Something flickered across the warden's expression, so briefly that Kethvar almost missed it. Amusement? Concern? Of course, Ambassador. We're prepared to provide full transparency regarding our operations here. Though I should mention that some areas of the station are currently under maintenance and may not be accessible during your visit. That's understandable. We don't wish to interfere with essential operations. Excellent. We've prepared quarters for your team in the diplomatic section. Once you're settled, I'll personally conduct your initial tour. I think you'll find our facilities unique. The transmission ended, and Kethvar found himself staring at the blank screen. In all his years of diplomatic service, he had developed an instinct for reading between the lines of what people didn't say. Warden Chun had been polite, professional, and completely forthcoming according to diplomatic protocol. So why did Kethvar feel like he had just been warned? Sir, Jolnai said quietly, did you notice the warden's uniform? Standard Coalition Correctional Service issue. What? The materials, sir? I've seen those uniforms before during my military service. That's not standard fabric. It's combat-rated fiber weave, designed to stop projectile weapons and disperse energy blasts. Why would a prison warden need military-grade protective gear? The docking process took nearly an hour, during which their ship was guided through a series of airlocks and scanning stations that analyzed everything from their hull composition to the atmospheric mix inside their vessel. By the time they finally settled into their assigned berth, Kethvar had counted no fewer than 24 different scanning systems, all of which were far more sophisticated than anything he had seen at other facilities. The docking bay itself was a testament to human engineering paranoia. The walls were lined with what appeared to be sensors, but Kethvar's trained eye caught the subtle signs of weapons systems disguised as maintenance equipment. The ceiling was dominated by massive blast doors that could seal the bay in seconds, while the floor showed the telltale striping of artificial gravity generators powerful enough to pin down even the strongest species. Welcome to Titan Station. Kethvar turned to see Warden Chen approaching with a small escort. The warden moved with the measured pace of someone accustomed to command, but his escort was what caught the ambassador's attention. For humans in what appeared to be standard security uniforms, but, like the warden's clothing, these bore the subtle signs of military hardware. More interesting still, they were positioned not to protect the warden, but to control the space around the visiting delegation. "Warden Chun," Kethvar replied, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. The warden's grip was firm, but not aggressive, exactly what diplomatic protocol called for. "Allow me to introduce my team. This is Joel Nye, my cultural attaché, Captain Veltar of the Quellan Deep Survey Corps, and Dr. Yithera from the Coalition Medical Ethics Board." "A pleasure to meet you all," Chun replied, his smile never wavering. "I hope your journey wasn't too taxing. The approach protocols here are somewhat more complex than most stations." "We noticed," Kethvar said carefully, "quite thorough security measures. Necessity, I'm afraid. Titan Station houses some of the galaxy's most dangerous individuals. We've learned that proper security requires preparation for scenarios that might seem unlikely to others." The warden gestured toward a corridor lined with what looked like decorative panels. "If you'll follow me, I'll show you to your quarters first, then we can begin the tour." As they walked through the station's corridors, Kethvar found himself constantly reassessing what he was seeing. The architecture was undeniably human. Clean lines, functional design, efficient use of space. But beneath the surface civility lay something else entirely. The corridors themselves were wider than standard coalition specifications, allowing for rapid movement of personnel and equipment. The ceiling panels could be quickly removed to provide access to what appeared to be maintenance conduits, but were large enough for armed personnel to move through. Most telling of all were the humans they passed in the corridors. Every single one acknowledged the warden with the crisp precision of military personnel, but more than that, they moved with the kind of situational awareness that spoke of combat training. These weren't civilian prison guards. They were soldiers pretending to be guards. "Warden," Dr. Yithera spoke up, her crystalline voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked her as one of the ethereal collective. "I notice your staff seems remarkably well-trained. Do you recruit from military backgrounds?" "We find that experience in high-stress situations translates well to correctional work," Chin replied smoothly. "Many of our personnel have backgrounds in security services, yes." It wasn't technically a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Kethvar filed the observation away for later consideration. Their quarters were located in what Chun described as the diplomatic wing of the station, a section that seemed designed specifically to house visiting dignitaries. The rooms were comfortable, spacious, and equipped with communication systems that could handle the diverse technological requirements of different species. They were also, Kethvar noted with growing unease, completely isolated from the rest of the station. "I'll leave you to settle in," Chin said once the tour of their quarters was complete. "Dinner is served in the executive dining facility at 1800 hour station time. I thought we might discuss your inspection schedule over the meal." After the warden and his escort departed, Kethvar gathered his team in his quarters. Initial observations: Captain Veltar's tentacles were in a constant state of nervous motion. "This isn't a normal prison, Ambassador. The defensive systems I've observed would be excessive for a military installation, let alone a correctional facility." "Agreed." Dr. Yithera's harmonic tones carried notes of concern. "But there's something else. Did you notice the air composition readings in the corridors?" "What about them?" "Slightly elevated oxygen content, traces of stimulant compounds that would enhance alertness, and reaction time in most humanoid species. This isn't just defensive architecture. It's designed to keep everyone who lives here in a state of heightened readiness." Joel Nye, who had been quietly reviewing her notes, looked up with confusion clear in her expression. "Sir, I've been comparing the station schematics we were provided with what we've actually observed. The layout doesn't match. Entire sections that should exist according to the plans aren't where they're supposed to be. And there are areas of the station that aren't accounted for in the official documentation at all." "How much variance are we talking about?" "Nearly 40% of the station's actual volume is unaccounted for in the official records. The implications of that statement settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Kethvar had inspected dozens of facilities across the galaxy, and discrepancies were common. Construction changes, efficiency modifications, bureaucratic oversights. But 40% represented an entirely different level of concealment. "There's something else," Captain Veltar said quietly. "During our approach, I was monitoring standard communication channels. This station is transmitting and receiving data at levels that suggest a facility at least 10 times larger than what we're seeing. The information processing capacity alone would require computational systems that dwarf anything I've seen outside of Coalition Central Command." "What kind of data?" "That's what troubles me. Most of it is encrypted beyond anything in standard civilian use. Military-grade communication protocols censor data from across this entire system, and what appears to be real-time updates from installations throughout human space." Dr. Ythera's crystalline form shifted through a spectrum of colors that indicated deep thought. "Ambassador, in my medical assessment protocols, I'm required to evaluate the psychological wellness of correctional staff. During our brief interaction, I was able to conduct passive scans of the humans we encountered, and their stress hormone levels are completely normal. Not elevated, not suppressed, normal. For personnel working in a high-security correctional facility housing dangerous criminals, that level of calm is unusual. Either they're using medical interventions to maintain psychological equilibrium, or they're not actually stressed because they feel completely secure in their ability to handle any situation that might arise," Kethvar finished. The room fell silent as the implications of their observations settled in. Kethvar had come to Titan Station expecting to find a prison that might be pushing the boundaries of Coalition regulations. Instead, he was beginning to suspect he had stumbled into something far more significant. "Sir," Jolnai said quietly, "what exactly do the humans think they need to be ready for?" Before Kethvar could answer, the room's communications system chimed softly. Warden Chen's voice filled the space with the same professional courtesy he had displayed earlier. "Ambassador, I hope you're settling in comfortably. I want to let you know that we've had to make some adjustments to tomorrow's inspection schedule. We've received word of some unusual activity in the outer system that requires our attention. Nothing to be concerned about, but it does mean we'll need to expedite certain portions of your tour." The transmission ended, leaving the delegation in thoughtful silence. Finally, Captain Veltar spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ambassador, what kind of unusual activity would require the attention of a prison facility?" Kethvar looked out the window of his quarters, where the stars wheeled slowly past as the habitat ring continued its rotation. Somewhere out there, beyond the comfortable glow of the station's defensive perimeter, something was happening that had caught the attention of whatever Titan Station really was. "I don't know, Captain," he admitted, "but I have the distinct feeling we're about to find out." As if summoned by his words, the station's lighting shifted subtly. Not an emergency, not an alert, just a barely perceptible change that somehow made everything feel more urgent. In the distance, almost too quiet to hear, came the sound of machinery activating, systems coming online, and the measured tread of boots moving with military precision through corridors that officially contained nothing more dangerous than prison guards and administrative personnel. Kethvar settled into his quarters for what he suspected would be a very short night's sleep. Tomorrow, he would begin his inspection of what was supposed to be a correctional facility. Tonight, he tried not to think about what would happen if his growing suspicions proved correct. Outside his window, Titan Station continued its slow rotation, a mechanical flower blooming in the void. Beautiful, efficient, and ready for something that the rest of the galaxy couldn't even imagine. The humans had built more than a prison here. They had built a fortress. The question was, what were they planning to use it for? The diplomatic quarters had become a prison of their own. For 6 hours, Kethvar and his team had been confined to their section while the sounds of military mobilization echoed through the station's corridors. The gentle hum of routine operations had been replaced by the urgent rhythm of a facility preparing for combat, and No amount of polite inquiry had yielded any information about what was happening. Ambassador, Captain Veltar whispered, his tentacles coiled tight with anxiety. I've been monitoring communication frequencies. Whatever is happening, it extends far beyond this station. I'm detecting mobilization signals from installations across this entire system. Dr. Ythura's crystalline form had shifted to the deep violet that indicated profound concern. The stress patterns I'm reading from the station's human population have changed dramatically. They're no longer exhibiting the calm confidence we observed earlier. This is genuine combat readiness. Jolnai looked up from her data tablet, where she had been compiling their observations. Sir, I've been analyzing the discrepancies between the official station records and what we've actually observed. The pattern is consistent with what human military history calls compartmentalization, the practice of concealing true military capabilities behind civilian facades. Before Kethvar could respond, the door chimed softly. Warden Chun entered, but the diplomatic veneer had been completely abandoned. He wore full military utilities now, complete with tactical equipment, and the insignia of rank that identified him not as a prison administrator, but as a Coalition Defense Force colonel. Ambassador, he said without preamble, we need to talk. Colonel Chun, I presume? Kethvar replied, emphasizing the military title. Yes. And before you ask, everything you've seen here has been authorized by the highest levels of Coalition Command. Titan Station is operating under sealed orders that supersede normal diplomatic oversight. Sealed orders for what purpose? Chun moved to the room's main display and activated a holographic projection that showed the local galactic region. Red indicators appeared at various points throughout the star map, pulsing with urgent priority. 3 hours ago, our long-range sensors detected incoming objects at the edge of this system. Unknown configuration, approaching at velocities that exceed anything in our technological database. They're not responding to communication attempts, and their trajectory suggests hostile intent. The implications hit Kethvar immediately. You're saying we're facing a first contact situation with potentially hostile aliens? Not first contact, Ambassador. We've encountered these particular aliens before. The problem is that officially, that encounter never happened. Chun manipulated the display, zooming in on tactical data that showed massive objects moving through space with purpose and coordination. 18 months ago, a human exploration vessel made contact with a species we've designated the Devourers. The encounter lasted less than 4 minutes before the exploration ship was completely destroyed, but they managed to transmit enough data to paint a terrifying picture. The hologram shifted to show recordings from a destroyed vessel, brief, chaotic images of massive ships that seemed to consume matter and energy from everything around them, converting it into more ships, more weapons, more destruction. The Devourers don't conquer worlds, Ambassador. They consume them. Every molecule of matter, every joule of energy, every living being, all converted into resources for their expansion. And they're completely indiscriminate. Carbon-based life, silicon-based consciousness, energy beings, it doesn't matter. They consume everything. Dr. Ythera's harmonic tones carried notes of horror. How is such a thing possible? We're not entirely sure. Their technology appears to be based on principles we don't understand, something that allows them to break down matter at the quantum level and reassemble it according to their needs. What we do know is that they represent an existential threat to every form of life in the galaxy. Jolnai's 4 arms gestured in the Zinthari pattern for overwhelming confusion. But if such a threat exists, why hasn't the Coalition been informed? Why the secrecy? Chen's expression hardened. Because the Coalition would have done what it always does when faced with an impossible threat: convened committees, formed study groups, debated response strategies, and argued about jurisdiction while entire worlds burned. That's a rather harsh assessment of Coalition decision-making processes, Kethvar said carefully. Is it, Ambassador? How long did it take the Coalition to respond to the Krillian Rebellion? 14 months of debate before the first military units were deployed, by which time 6 worlds had fallen and billions were dead. How about the synthetic uprising in the Outer Rim? 8 months of diplomatic negotiations with machines that were literally consuming organic life to fuel their expansion. Qin activated another display, showing response timelines for various coalition crises. The pattern was consistent: lengthy deliberation periods followed by inadequate responses that often came too late to prevent massive casualties. The humans decided that this particular threat required a different approach, Chen continued. Instead of waiting for the coalition to act, we began preparing our own response by disguising military installations as prisons. Captain Veltar asked, by preparing for a war that the rest of the galaxy doesn't even know is coming. Titan Station isn't the only facility like this, Captain. Throughout human space, we've been building defenses, training personnel, and developing the weapons technology necessary to fight an enemy that can consume entire solar systems. The scope of the deception was staggering. Kethvar found himself reassessing every human facility he had ever visited, every interaction with human officials, every aspect of humanity's integration into the coalition. The inmates, he said slowly, they're not criminals at all, are they? Some are, Chen admitted. But most are volunteers, military personnel, their families, civilian specialists who agreed to live undercover while we prepared for this war. The community you saw isn't a rehabilitation program. It's a military base designed to look like a civilian facility. And now the Devourers have found this system. Yes, our outer sensor nets detected their approach approximately 6 hours ago. Based on their speed and trajectory, they'll reach the inner system within 18 hours. Dr. Ythera's form shifted through a rapid spectrum of colors as she processed the implications. Warden, Colonel, what you're describing represents a threat to every living being in this galaxy. Surely the Coalition has a right to know. The Coalition will know, Doctor. In fact, they're about to receive a comprehensive briefing on the situation. But by then, the first battle will already be underway. Chen activated his communication system. Control, this is Colonel Chun. Initiate Coalition Alert Protocol 7. Full disclosure, all relevant data, Priority Alpha. Acknowledged, Colonel. Protocol 7 is active. What did you just do? Kethvar asked. Ended the secrecy. As of this moment, every coalition facility, every government, every military command is receiving complete intelligence on the Devourer threat along with human recommendations for immediate defensive measures. The irony wasn't lost on Kethvar. The humans had spent months preparing for this moment, while maintaining the fiction of being peaceful members of the coalition. Now, faced with imminent attack, they were revealing not only the threat, but the extent of their own preparations. Colonel, what exactly are humanity's recommendations? Chen smiled grimly. Run. Get as many people as possible away from the likely invasion routes, and prepare for a fighting withdrawal to defensive positions we've been preparing throughout human space. And if the coalition refuses to follow those recommendations, then they'll die, Ambassador. The Devourers don't negotiate, they don't take prisoners, and they don't distinguish between combatants and civilians. Everything in their path gets consumed. The brutal simplicity of the situation was settling over Kethvar like a cold weight. Humanity had discovered a threat that could end galactic civilization and had spent months preparing for war while the rest of the galaxy continued with business as usual. Now the war was about to begin, and the only question was whether the coalition would be ready in time. What do you need from us? He asked. Right now? Stay out of the way while we handle the initial response. Once the immediate threat is contained, we'll need the coalition's full mobilization to have any hope of long-term survival. You're that confident you can contain the initial attack. Ambassador, for the past 18 months, every human facility like this one has been preparing for exactly this scenario. We've run simulations, developed tactics, built weapons, and trained personnel specifically to fight the Devourers. We may not win the first engagement, but we will make them pay dearly for every system they try to consume. The station's alert system activated again, but this time the announcement was different. All personnel, this is command. Enemy contact in 16 hours. All defensive systems are online. All fighters armed and ready. All ground forces at combat stations. Today, we find out if our preparations were sufficient. Today, we defend not just this system, but every living being in the galaxy. Make it count. The calm professionalism of the announcement was chilling in its implications. These people had been living with the knowledge of this threat for over a year, preparing for a battle that would determine the survival of galactic civilization. Colonel Kethvar said, "Is there anything my team can do to help?" Actually, yes. We're going to need witnesses. When this is over, the Coalition is going to want a full accounting of what happened here. Your diplomatic credentials and independent observation will be crucial for establishing the official record. You want us to document the battle? I want you to document everything. The threat, our response, the effectiveness of our preparations, and most importantly, the cost of the secrecy that was necessary to make this defense possible. Dr. Ythura's harmonic tones carried notes of grim determination. We'll document it all, Colonel. But what if your defenses fail? What if the Devourers break through? Then you'll document the end of everything we know, Doctor. And maybe somewhere else in the galaxy, someone will learn from our mistakes and do better. The next several hours passed in a blur of activity. The station transformed completely as its true nature was fully revealed. Weapon systems emerged from every concealed position. Fighter bays opened to disgorge squadrons of military craft. Personnel who had been pretending to be prison guards revealed themselves as soldiers, technicians, and specialists trained for exactly this kind of warfare. Kethvar and his team were given access to the station's observation decks and sensor feeds, allowing them to monitor the preparations and document everything as Chun had requested. What they observed was a masterpiece of military engineering and preparation. The prison contained enough firepower to level a small planet. The inmates were revealed to be some of the most highly trained military personnel in human space. The rehabilitation programs had been combat training exercises designed to prepare for fighting an enemy that could absorb and repurpose any technology it encountered. Ambassador, Jolnai said as they watched the final preparations, "I'm beginning to understand why the humans felt secrecy was necessary. If the Coalition had known about this threat 18 months ago, what would have been the result? Panik, Kithvar admitted. System-wide evacuations, economic collapse, political chaos. The galaxy would have torn itself apart before the Devourers even arrived. And now we have chance. The humans bought us time to prepare by accepting the burden of secrecy and the risks of deception. Whether it will be enough." He shrugged, a gesture that conveyed more uncertainty than any words could. The final hours before contact were spent in tense preparation. Throughout human space, similar facilities were revealing their true nature and preparing for battle. The Coalition was receiving detailed briefings on both the threat and humanity's preparations, along with urgent recommendations for immediate defensive measures. But Kethvar knew that for the first critical hours of this war, the defense would rest entirely on the shoulders of the species that had spent over a year preparing in secret for a battle that would determine the survival of everything they held dear. The humans had always been on guard, even when the rest of the galaxy thought they were simply managing prisoners and administrative duties. Now everyone would discover why that vigilance had been necessary. In 6 hours, the Devourers would arrive. In 6 hours, the galaxy would learn whether humanity's preparations had been sufficient to buy them the time needed for survival. Looking out at the stars, where massive shapes were moving with purpose and malevolent intent, Kethvar found himself hoping that human paranoia and preparation would prove to be exactly what the galaxy needed. Because if it wasn't, there might not be a galaxy left to save. The Devourers arrived exactly when the humans had predicted they would. From the observation deck of Titan Station, Kethvar watched as space itself seemed to tear open at the edge of the system. The enemy didn't emerge from hyperspace in the controlled, gradual fashion of civilized species. Instead, they burst through the fabric of reality like infection breaking through healthy tissue, bringing with them an aura of wrongness that seemed to affect every sensor system simultaneously. "Mother of Stars," Captain Veltar whispered, his tentacles coiling in patterns of absolute terror. "What are those things?" The Devourer ships defied every principle of engineering that Kethvar understood. They weren't built so much as grown, organic curves that pulsed with malevolent energy, surfaces that seemed to shift and flow like living tissue, and sizes that strained comprehension. The largest of them was easily the size of a small moon, while the smallest were still larger than Coalition dreadnoughts. But it wasn't their size that was most disturbing. It was the way they moved through space, consuming everything in their path. Asteroids, debris, even stray particles of cosmic dust. All of it was drawn into the ships and somehow transformed into more hull material, more weapons, more destructive capability. Colonel Shen Docteur. Ythera's harmonic tones carried notes of scientific fascination mixed with horror. How is this physically possible? They appear to be violating several fundamental laws of physics. "We don't understand it either, Doctor," Chen replied from the Battle Command Center. His voice carried the calm professionalism of a military officer, but Kethvar could hear the underlying tension. "Our best theories suggest they're using technology that manipulates matter at the quantum level, but that doesn't explain how they generate the energy required for such massive conversions." The holographic displays surrounding them showed tactical data as human forces throughout the system moved into position. What had appeared to be civilian installations revealed themselves as military bases. What had looked like routine shipping traffic was actually a carefully coordinated fleet deployment. Even the asteroid mining operations scattered throughout the system transformed into weapons platforms bristling with defensive systems. "Impressive," Kithvar admitted. "How long have you been planning this deception?" "Since the first contact 18 months ago," Chen replied. "We knew they would come eventually, and we knew we would have only one chance to stop them. Everything we've built, everything we've prepared, it all comes down to the next few hours." The first engagement began at the system's edge, where human scout ships made contact with the advancing Devourer fleet. Kethvar watched the tactical display with growing amazement as the scouts didn't immediately retreat. Instead, they engaged in what appeared to be deliberate sacrifice, ramming attacks designed to test Devourer defenses while gathering crucial intelligence. "Why are they throwing their ships away?" Jolnai asked in horror. "They're not throwing them away," Chen explained grimly. "Every one of those ships is equipped with advanced sensor packages and quantum communication arrays. They're gathering real-time data on Devourer capabilities and transmitting it back to our main forces. Those crews knew they wouldn't survive, but their sacrifice will make the difference between victory and defeat." The data streaming back from the doomed scout ships painted a terrifying picture. The Devourers didn't just have superior numbers and size. Their technology was fundamentally different from anything in the galaxy's experience. They absorbed energy weapons, corrupted electronic systems through some form of technological infection, and converted destroyed enemy vessels into additional attack craft. "How do you fight something like that?" Captain Veltar asked. "Carefully," Chen replied, "and with weapons specifically designed to exploit their vulnerabilities." As if summoned by his words, the main human fleet revealed itself. Ships that had been hiding in the shadows of planets and asteroids throughout the system activated their drives and began moving toward the Devourer advance. But these weren't the standardized coalition vessels that Kethvar expected to see. "Those are human designs," he said, studying the tactical display. "I don't recognize any of those ship classes." 18 months of intensive development, Chun confirmed. Every one of those vessels was designed specifically to fight the Devourers. Specialized armor that can't be consumed, weapons that disrupt their matter conversion technology, and, most importantly, AI systems that are completely isolated from any network they could contaminate. The first major engagement began as the human fleet intercepted a Devourer advance force near the system's fourth planet. What Kethvar witnessed challenged every assumption he had about space combat. The human ships didn't engage in the traditional long-range exchanges of energy fire that characterized most interstellar warfare. Instead, they closed to almost point-blank range and unleashed weapons that seemed designed to prevent the Devourers from adapting to the attack. Quantum disruption torpedoes, Chen explained as brilliant flashes lit up the tactical display. They destabilize matter at the subatomic level, making it impossible for the Devourers to absorb the destroyed material. And before you ask, yes, they're based on technology that officially doesn't exist. Where did you acquire such weapons? We built them. When faced with an enemy that could consume conventional technology, we had to develop something completely new. Every human research facility, every military laboratory, every university physics department has been working on anti-devourer technology for over a year. The battle was unlike anything Kethvar had ever witnessed. Human ships moved in coordinated swarms, using tactics that seemed designed to prevent the Devourers from concentrating their overwhelming firepower on individual targets. When a human ship was destroyed, it didn't just explode, it triggered a quantum cascade that prevented the wreckage from being absorbed and converted. But the Devourers were adapting. Even as their advance force took heavy casualties from the unexpected human tactics, their larger ships began deploying countermeasures. Waves of smaller craft emerged from the massive vessels, each one apparently designed to test a different approach to overcoming human defenses. They're learning, Dr. Yithera observed with scientific detachment. Each attack wave is incorporating lessons from the previous one. We expected that, Chen replied. The question is whether we can inflict enough damage before they adapt completely. The answer came in the form of humanity's second surprise. Throughout the system, installations that had appeared to be civilian infrastructure revealed their true nature as massive weapons platforms. Titan Station itself contributed to the barrage, its disguised armaments adding to a coordinated strike that targeted the largest Devourer vessels. The weapons weren't conventional missiles or energy beams. Instead, they deployed something the humans called reality anchors, devices that somehow prevented the Devourers from using their matter conversion abilities within a localized area of space. How is that possible? Captain Veltar asked in amazement as they watched Devourer ships suddenly become vulnerable to conventional attacks within the reality anchor fields. Theoretical physics that became practical necessity, Chen explained. When your enemy can manipulate matter at the quantum level, you need weapons that can stabilize quantum states and prevent such manipulation. The battle reached its climax when the largest Devourer vessel, the one Chen's people had designated as the command ship, broke through the outer defensive lines and began its approach toward the system's inhabited worlds. The human fleet concentrated everything they had on stopping this single massive threat. What followed was the most desperate 15 minutes of combat Kethvar had ever witnessed. Human ships threw themselves against the massive Devourer vessel with no regard for their own survival. Wave after wave of quantum disruption torpedoes battered the enemy's defenses while reality anchors created pockets of stable space where conventional weapons could function. The Devourer command ship began to show damage, its organic hull developing wounds that leaked energy and debris into space. But it was also adapting, its surface shifting and flowing as it incorporated lessons from each human attack. It's not going to be enough, Chen said quietly, watching the tactical display as human casualties mounted. We're hurting them, but not fast enough. They'll break through the inner defenses within the hour. That's when the coalition fleet arrived. Kethvar had been so focused on the battle that he hadn't noticed the hyperspace signatures building at the edge of the system. But suddenly, the displays were filled with new contacts, coalition vessels from a dozen different species, all converging on the battlefield with weapons charged and ready. About time, Chun muttered, but there was relief in his voice. The coalition reinforcements didn't arrive with the careful coordination of the human defense. Instead, they came in waves as different species fleets completed their jumps from across the galaxy. Zenthari battleships, Quellan carrier groups, ethereal research vessels converted to combat platforms, Even the mysterious void dancers emerged from their dimensional hiding places to join the battle. How did they coordinate this response so quickly? Joel and I asked in amazement. Your people might be slow to make decisions, Chen replied, but once they commit to action, they're remarkably effective. Every species in the coalition has been preparing for this battle since we transmitted the threat assessment 6 hours ago. The arrival of coalition forces changed the dynamic of the entire engagement. The Devourers found themselves facing not just human anti-consumption technology, but the combined tactical doctrines of dozens of species, each bringing their own unique approaches to warfare. The Zinthari used their mastery of energy manipulation to create weapons that the Devourers couldn't absorb. The Quellans deployed massive carrier groups that overwhelmed Devourer defenses through sheer numbers. The Ethereal Collective used their understanding of dimensional physics to attack the enemy from directions that shouldn't have existed. But it was the combination of human preparation and coalition diversity that proved decisive. Human reality anchors created stable combat zones where coalition weapons could function at full effectiveness. Coalition numbers provided the firepower necessary to exploit the vulnerabilities that human research had discovered. The battle for the system lasted 12 hours. When it was over, the Devourer fleet had been completely destroyed, their remains scattered across space in quantum-disrupted fragments that could never be reconstituted. But the cost had been enormous. Nearly 40% of the human defense fleet was gone, along with significant coalition casualties from the reinforcing fleets. Is it over? Dr. Yithera asked as the tactical displays finally showed clear space. This battle is over, Chen replied. But this was just one fleet, one probe of our defenses. The main Devourer force is still out there, and now they know we can hurt them. How long do we have? Our intelligence suggests they'll need several months to adapt to the countermeasures we used here. After that, Chen shrugged. We'd better be ready for a much larger attack. As the immediate aftermath of the battle unfolded, Kethvar found himself witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. The Coalition's response to the Devourer threat was swift and comprehensive, but it was built on the foundation of human preparation and sacrifice. Species that had been suspicious of human militarization suddenly understood why it had been necessary. Governments that had questioned human secrecy now appreciated the value of operational security when facing an existential threat. Military commanders who had criticized human tactics were studying them as the template for future anti-Devourer operations. Ambassador, Chan said as they watched coalition and human ships working together to secure the system. What's your assessment of humanity's actions here? Kethvar considered the question carefully. The humans had deceived the entire galaxy for over a year, building military capabilities under false pretenses and preparing for a war they hadn't told anyone was coming. By any standard of diplomatic protocol, their actions were completely unacceptable. They had also saved galactic civilization. Your methods were questionable, Colonel, he said finally, but your results speak for themselves. Without human preparation, this system would have fallen, and the Devourers would have had time to adapt their technology before facing significant resistance. And the deception, the disguised military installations, the false prisoner populations, the violations of coalition oversight protocols. Necessary, Kethvar admitted. The coalition would never have approved such extensive militarization based on the reports of a single exploration vessel. By the time we finished debating the threat's reality, it would have been too late to mount any defense. The implications of that admission would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. The coalition had been forced to confront the reality that its careful, deliberative processes, designed to prevent hasty military action, were inadequate for dealing with existential threats that required immediate response. What happens now? Captain Veltar asked. Now we prepare for the real war, Chen replied. This was just the opening engagement. The Devourers know we exist, they know we can hurt them, and they know our approximate capabilities. They'll be back with everything they have. And humanity's role in that preparation? Chen looked out at the stars, where Coalition and human ships continued their joint operations. "We'll do what we've always done, Ambassador. We'll stand guard. We'll prepare for the next threat. And we'll make sure that when it comes, the galaxy is ready." The first battle was over, but Kethvar knew that the real test was yet to come. The Devourers would return, and next time they would be prepared for human countermeasures and coalition resistance. The question was whether the galaxy could overcome its political divisions and cultural differences quickly enough to mount an effective defense against an enemy that viewed all life as nothing more than raw material for expansion. Looking at the combined human and coalition fleets working together in the aftermath of victory, Kethvar allowed himself a moment of cautious optimism. For the first time in galactic history, every species faced the same threat and shared the same stakes. If that wasn't enough to unite them, nothing would be. 6 months after the Battle of Titan Station, Ambassador Kethvar found himself standing in what had once been the Coalition Council's most prestigious debating chamber. The elegant circular chamber, designed for careful deliberation and diplomatic discourse, had been transformed into something that would have been unrecognizable to previous generations of coalition leadership. Holographic displays showed real-time intelligence data from across the galaxy. Military officers from dozens of species worked alongside civilian administrators to coordinate the largest defensive mobilization in galactic history. Where once there had been ceremonial podiums for dignified speeches, there were now tactical planning stations where life and death decisions were made with military efficiency. "The transformation has been remarkable," Dr. Ythera observed, her crystalline form shifting through colors that indicated a mixture of amazement and concern. 6 months ago, the Coalition couldn't agree on trade regulations. Now we're coordinating military operations across 47 systems. "Necessity has a way of clarifying priorities," Kethvar replied, watching as a Zenthri general and a human admiral worked together to deploy defensive installations that would have been impossible to approve through normal coalition processes. The threat of complete annihilation had accomplished what centuries of diplomatic effort had failed to achieve. Species that had barely tolerated each other were now sharing their most advanced military technologies. Governments that had spent decades protecting their sovereignty were voluntarily subordinating their defense forces to unified command structures. Even the most isolationist cultures had opened their borders to coalition military presence. "Ambassador," a familiar voice called from across the chamber. Colonel Chun, now wearing the insignia of a coalition defense force general, approached with a data tablet in hand. The latest intelligence reports from the Outer Rim sensors. Kethvar accepted the tablet and studied the information with growing unease. The data showed Devourer activity in 17 different sectors, all well beyond the range of coalition defensive installations. More troubling still, the pattern of activity suggested the enemy was adapting their technology far more rapidly than human projections had anticipated. "They're learning from our victory at Titan Station," Chen explained. "Every countermeasure we used, every tactic we employed, they're developing responses. The reality anchors that were so effective 6 months ago are only marginally useful against their newer ships. How long do our current advantages last? Optimistically, 3 months. After that, they'll have adapted to most of our anti-consumption technology and developed countermeasures for coalition weapon systems." The implications were sobering. Despite the galaxy-wide mobilization, despite the unprecedented cooperation between species, despite the massive resources devoted to defense preparations, they were still losing the technological arms race against an enemy that could adapt and evolve at a pace that organic intelligence couldn't match. "There's something else," Chen continued, his expression growing more serious. "We've been analyzing the Devourer technology recovered from the battle, and we've discovered something troubling about their expansion patterns." He activated the chamber's main holographic display, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with red indicators marking known or suspected Devourer activity. "They're not just randomly consuming everything they encounter," he explained. "There's a pattern to their expansion, a method to their consumption. They're specifically targeting systems with high concentrations of intelligent life. Dr. Euthera's harmonic tones carried notes of scientific horror. They're not just consuming matter and energy. They're consuming intelligence itself. That's our current theory. We think they're using the neural patterns of sentient beings to enhance their own adaptive capabilities. Every species they consume makes them smarter, more capable of understanding and countering our defenses. The revelation cast the entire conflict in a new and more terrifying light. The Devourers weren't just a force of natural destruction. They were a form of technological predator that grew stronger with every victory, more intelligent with every species they consumed. How many civilizations have they already absorbed? Kethvar asked quietly. Unknown. Our deep space reconnaissance suggests they've been active in at least 12 galaxies before reaching ours. If each galaxy contained even a fraction of the intelligent species we have here, Chun let the implication hang in the air. The scale of the enemy they faced was almost incomprehensible. Not just one species or one fleet, but the accumulated intelligence and resources of potentially hundreds of galaxies, all focused on the singular goal of consuming and expanding. General Chun, Captain Veltar approached from one of the tactical stations, his tentacles writhing with agitation. We're receiving priority communications from the Outer Rim Defense Network. Multiple Devourer fleets have been detected approaching Coalition space. The Chamber's activity level increased immediately as the news spread. Officers from every species moved to their stations while communication systems activated to coordinate response across dozens of star systems. How many fleets? Chen asked. 17 confirmed, possibly more. They're approaching from different vectors, suggesting a coordinated multi-front assault designed to overwhelm our defensive capabilities. Chen nodded grimly. They learned from Titan Station. Instead of sending a single massive force that we could concentrate our defenses against, they're forcing us to spread our resources across multiple engagement zones. Can our defenses hold? Kethvar asked. Some of them, but not all. We simply don't have the ships and personnel to defend every system simultaneously. Some worlds are going to fall, and when they do, the Devourers will absorb their populations and technology, making them even stronger for the next wave of attacks. The reality of their situation was settling over everyone in the chamber. Despite 6 months of unprecedented preparation, despite the most massive military mobilization in galactic history, they were still going to lose worlds, lose populations, lose the war of attrition against an enemy that grew stronger with every victory. There's another option, Chen said quietly, but it's one that the Coalition has consistently rejected. What option? The Scorched Galaxy Protocol. Kethvar had heard whispers of such a plan, but he had dismissed them as the extreme contingencies that military planners always developed, but never intended to implement. You're talking about deliberately destroying entire systems to prevent Devourer absorption. Not just systems, entire sectors if necessary. Strip them of all useful matter and energy, leave nothing for the Devourers to consume, create a barrier of empty space that they can't cross because there's nothing there to fuel their expansion. The moral implications of such a strategy were staggering. It would mean the deliberate destruction of thousands of worlds, the evacuation or sacrifice of trillions of sentient beings, the complete abandonment of entire regions of the galaxy to create a firebreak against Devourer expansion. The Coalition Council would never approve such measures, Dr. Euthera said, her harmonic tones carrying notes of revulsion. The Coalition Council approved the extermination protocols 2 months ago, Chen replied quietly. The authorization is sealed and classified, but if the military situation deteriorates beyond the point where conventional defense is possible, selected commanders have the authority to implement total system sterilization. The silence that followed was profound. Everyone in the chamber understood what Shan was telling them, that despite all their preparations, despite all their technological advances, despite the unprecedented unity they had achieved, they were still losing. The best they could hope for was to retreat to a defensible core of systems and sacrifice everything else to buy time for survival. How many systems would we lose? Captain Veltar asked. Conservative estimates suggest we would need to abandon 60% of inhabited coalition space to create an effective barrier. That represents approximately 4,000 inhabited worlds and an estimated population of 800 billion sentient beings. The numbers were too large to fully comprehend, but their meaning was clear. Humanity's preparations had been insufficient. Coalition unity had been insufficient. Even their combined military and technological capabilities were insufficient to protect galactic civilization from an enemy that had consumed entire galaxies before arriving here. There's one more thing, Chun continued. The humans have developed contingency plans that go beyond the Scorched Galaxy Protocol. What kind of contingency plans? Project Seed Ship. If conventional defense and Scorched Galaxy tactics both fail, we evacuate as many people as possible to specially prepared vessels and flee to another galaxy entirely. The admission hung in the air like a death sentence for galactic civilization. After millions of years of development, after the rise of hundreds of intelligent species, after the creation of art and literature and philosophy that represented the pinnacle of organic achievement, it might all end with a desperate flight to unknown regions of space. How many could be evacuated? Kethvar asked. Perhaps 1% of the total galactic population, if we're fortunate. The seed ships can't carry entire civilizations, just enough genetic diversity and cultural knowledge to preserve the essence of what we are. Dr. Ythera's form shifted to the deep black that indicated profound despair. So our options are total war, total destruction, or total evacuation. Those are the realities we face, Chun confirmed. But there's one thing the projections can't account for, which is the same thing that made human victory possible at Titan Station. The same thing that allowed us to hurt the Devourers when they thought nothing could threaten them. The same thing that has kept humanity alive on a planet that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. What's that? Chun looked around the chamber, where species from across the galaxy worked together with a unity and purpose that would have been impossible just months earlier. We never give up. We never stop preparing. We never stop looking for the next threat, the next challenge, the next problem that needs to be solved. And we never, ever let our guard down. As if summoned by his words, the chamber's communication systems activated with incoming reports from across Coalition space. The first wave of Devourer attacks had begun, and the largest war in galactic history was underway. But instead of panic or despair, the chamber filled with the calm efficiency of people who had been preparing for exactly this moment. Officers took their positions, communication channels opened to coordinate defensive responses, and across dozens of star systems, Coalition forces moved to implement the tactics and strategies that had been developed during 6 months of unprecedented cooperation. Ambassador, Chun said as he moved toward his command station, you wanted to understand why humans are always on guard. You wanted to know the truth about Deathworlder prisons. Now you know. Kethvar watched as the general took command of defenses that spanned multiple galaxies, coordinating responses to threats that could end civilization itself, managing resources and personnel with the same calm efficiency he had shown when pretending to run a correctional facility. We're always on guard because the universe is a dangerous place. Chun continued over the growing activity in the chamber. We build our prisons like fortresses because we know that eventually something will test every defense we have. We prepare for the impossible because we've learned that the impossible has a habit of becoming inevitable. The battle reports are coming in now. Victories and defeats, successful defenses and catastrophic losses, the ebb and flow of a war being fought simultaneously across dozens of star systems. Some coalition forces were holding their positions and inflicting heavy casualties on Devourer fleets. Others were retreating or implementing Scorched Galaxy protocols to deny resources to the enemy. And sometimes, Chin said quietly, watching as the tactical displays showed the real-time progress of battles across known space. being paranoid and overprepared is exactly what the galaxy needs. Through the chamber's massive viewing windows, Kethvar could see the stars where coalition and human forces were fighting for the survival of everything they had ever built or believed in. Some of those lights would be extinguished before the night was over. Some of the civilizations represented in this chamber would not survive the week. But they were fighting with weapons and tactics that had been developed in secret, using strategies that had been planned during months of careful deception, coordinated by command structures that had been disguised as civilian facilities throughout human space. The humans had been preparing for this war for over a year, while the rest of the galaxy continued with business as usual. They had built fortresses and called them prisons. They had trained armies and called them rehabilitation programs. They had prepared for the end of the world and called it routine security measures. Now, as the greatest threat in galactic history descended upon them all, that preparation was the only thing standing between civilization and complete annihilation. "Thank you, General," Kethvar said quietly. "For what? For never letting your guard down. For being ready when the rest of us weren't. For understanding that sometimes the price of peace is constant preparation for war." Chin nodded, then turned his attention to the displays showing battles raging across the galaxy. "Don't thank us yet, Ambassador. Thank us when this is over and there's still something left to save." As the night continued and reports flowed in from the various fronts, Kethvar found himself thinking about the question that had brought him to Titan Station in the first place. He had come to inspect a prison facility and discovered a military installation. He had expected to find bureaucratic irregularities and instead uncovered preparations for the greatest war in galactic history. The humans had been right to deceive them, right to prepare in secret, right to build fortresses and call them prisons, to train armies and call them rehabilitation programs, to maintain constant vigilance while the rest of the galaxy enjoyed the illusion of peace. Because in the end, that vigilance, that preparation, that refusal to ever truly relax their guard was the only reason there was still a galaxy left to fight for. Looking out at the stars where the fate of trillions was being decided by beings who had learned never to trust in peace, never to assume that today's safety guaranteed tomorrow's survival, Kethvar understood at last why humans were always on guard. The universe was full of things that wanted to kill you, and the only way to survive was to be ready for all of them, all the time, even when everyone else thought you were being paranoid. Especially then, the war would continue. Some battles would be won, others lost. But whatever the outcome, the galaxy now understood the truth about Deathworlder prisons and the species that built them. They were never just prisons. They were promises. Promises that no matter what threatened the peace, no matter what horror emerged from the dark between stars, someone would be ready. Someone would be watching. Someone would stand guard against the night. And they would never, ever let their guard down.